Hi, I'm Vesper. My sister kicked me out of the family business share meeting with a smile on her face and a forged document in her hand. They said I didn't belong, that Dad never intended for me to have a seat at the table. But behind that lie was a carefully erased legacy. A legacy I uncovered, one file at a time, on a blue USB drive my father hid before he died. And when I played that file in front of the board, no one spoke. Why did they silence me for years? Why did my own mother say, "Don't make your sister feel attacked," while she watched them delete my name from the company history? Do you really want to know how far a family will go to protect power? Because what happened after that meeting, it wasn't just about business, it was about blood. And I bled to find the truth. Want to hear what was on that USB? The building hadn't changed much. The same polished floors that once echoed my father's determined steps. The same glass doors that used to open with pride when I walked in beside him. But something was different today. Not in the walls or the lighting, but in the air. The kind of difference you feel before a storm, not one you see. I stepped into the lobby, holding a small bouquet of white lilies, Dad's favorite. A memorial display had been arranged to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of his passing. There were candles, a photo from his early days at Linwell, and a printed list of names scheduled to speak in remembrance. I scanned the list, searching for mine. It wasn't there. I looked again, slower this time. Names of people who barely knew him were included. Consultants, newer board members, even Jack, the junior partner he never fully trusted. But not me. Not his daughter. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. The receptionist, a young man who couldn't have been older than 25, glanced up. "Can I help you?" he asked, cheerful, like this was just any other Thursday. I offered a tight smile. "I was just here to pay my respects." He hesitated. "You're not on the list of speakers." "I know," I said quietly. "That's been made clear." I placed the lilies next to the photo. For a brief second, I imagined Dad looking out from that frame, shaking his head the way he used to when someone did something foolish. "Don't let them get to you, Vess," he used to say. "They only win if you stop showing up." As I walked out of the lobby, I caught a glimpse of Seraphine through the hallway glass. She stood in heels that screamed power, surrounded by people who called her ma'am and CEO. She was laughing. I didn't know if she'd seen me, but even if she had, she wouldn't have flinched. That night, I returned home to a stack of mail. Among bills and coupon flyers was a cream-colored envelope with cursive lettering. My name, misspelled. First sign it wasn't thoughtful. Inside, a wedding invitation. For my nephew. The return address was Seraphine's home. I blinked hard at the line beneath my name. Family friend. Family friend. I set the envelope down on the counter. I didn't shred it. I didn't burn it. I just left it there, like a souvenir of someone else's rewritten version of reality. I made a cup of coffee, darker than I usually liked, and sat in the quiet. 3 years ago, Dad and I had lunch at the diner on 5th Street. He was already tired from treatments, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Over pancakes, he leaned across the table and said, "If anything ever happens to me, don't let them erase you. They'll try, Vess. Not because you're weak, but because you make them uncomfortable. You see too much." At the time, I'd laughed, thought he was being dramatic. Now, it didn't feel dramatic enough. I scrolled through my phone, more out of habit than curiosity, and there she was. Seraphine. Her latest post showed the memorial display from earlier today. Same lilies, same photo of Dad. The caption, "Still carrying forward Dad's legacy, surrounded by the family he loved most." Not a single photo of me, not even one from the archives. I read it 3 times. The comments were filled with heart emojis and praise from business associates. "You're an inspiration, Seraphine. He'd be so proud of you. Family first, always." My hand didn't shake. It stayed perfectly still as I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. I had always believed that truth didn't need to scream, that it could exist quietly and still be enough. But maybe there came a time when silence wasn't strength, It was surrender. I reached over to a small box on the sideboard, a birthday gift I'd sent to my nephew 3 weeks ago, returned unopened, still wrapped in blue paper with a silver ribbon. A sticker now adorned the front, not accepted by recipient. The handwriting on the sticker looked suspiciously like Seraphine's. Neat, perfectly spaced, just enough flourish to be cold. I picked it up, felt the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't the gift itself that hurt. It was the message beneath it. You're not wanted. Not even here. I placed it on my lap, letting the silence of the room settle around me like a second skin. They erased me quietly, I whispered, my voice steady, almost detached. Now I'll return the favor, loud and clear. 2 days before the shareholder meeting, I decided to stop by the office. Not for a confrontation, not yet. I just wanted to leave a bouquet for Dad at the memorial corner they set up each year. A quiet gesture, no drama, no noise. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and corporate ego. Familiar faces passed me, eyes flicking toward my hands but avoiding my face. I walked toward the memorial by the elevator bank. The photo they'd chosen of Dad was the one where he was shaking hands with a senator, not the one where he was laughing with his sleeves rolled up in the old R&D lab. The one where he looked like himself. That version of him didn't fit their narrative. I set the bouquet down, adjusted the ribbon, and stepped back. Then I heard the click of heels. "Vesper!" Seraphine's voice lilted behind me. "So good of you to stop by." I turned, keeping my expression neutral. She wore a tailored navy suit and a smile that could have been cut from vinyl, shiny, flexible, and entirely manufactured. "Just here to pay respects," I replied. She nodded, eyes scanning the lobby like she was hosting a press conference. "We've done something special this year. Legacy matters, you know?" I bit back the obvious response. "Legacy matters, except when it includes me." After a few polite words, I left. No fight, no raised voice, just the quiet withdrawal of someone who's learned that showing up doesn't always mean you're welcome. Later that afternoon, a LinkedIn notification pinged on my phone. Seraphine had posted a photo from the memorial display. There she was, arms around 2 of Dad's former colleagues, standing in front of the flowers I brought. The caption read, "Still carrying forward Dad's legacy, surrounded by the family he loved most." I zoomed in. There I was, blurred in the background, mid-turn, cropped perfectly at the edge. "Subtle," I muttered, tossing the phone face down on the couch. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Hi, sweetheart," she began, her voice soft and slow, like she was winding up to ask a favor. "Hey, Mom. I saw Seraphine today," she said quickly. "She mentioned you're asking questions again." I didn't respond. There was a pause, then a low sigh. "Vess, I've been having chest pain, anxiety. You're digging. It's not helping." And there it was. The guilt card, neatly played and softly delivered. "Don't bring this to court, sweetheart. I'm not sure my heart can handle it." I closed my eyes. It's not about hurting anyone. "It never is. Until it does," she whispered. We ended the call shortly after. I stared at the ceiling, trying to recall the last time Mom had asked how I was, without it being tethered to some storm I was causing by simply existing. The next morning, I walked into the Lindwell reception area. It was quiet. Too quiet. I approached the front desk. "I'm here to pick up the shareholder packet for the meeting," I said. The receptionist, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, offered a strained smile. "I'm sorry. We've been advised to share those only with current board members." I felt my shoulders square instinctively. "I'm still a shareholder." She hesitated. "There's been updates to the internal list. I'm not at liberty." "It's fine," I said. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I pulled a small notepad from my purse, wrote the date and her name, then turned and left. Let them see I was documenting everything. Quiet doesn't mean passive. That afternoon, I stopped by the post office to send off some documents to my attorney. While I waited in line, the clerk returned with a small parcel wrapped in the same silver paper I'd used weeks ago. "Return to sender," he said, placing it on the counter. I turned it over. The label, "Return to sender, rejected." The handwriting was neat, curved slightly to the right. Deliberate. Seraphines. For a moment, I just stood there. Not angry, not sad, just numb. By the time I got home, the sky had darkened. The apartment smelled like peppermint tea and old books, my usual comforts. I changed out of my coat, set the returned package on the table, and moved toward Dad's old desk in the corner. The wood had faded at the edges, but the grooves in the armrest were still from his fingers. I sat down and opened the laptop. I plugged in the blue USB drive I'd been quietly filling over the last 2 years. Documents, emails, old contracts, time-stamped photos. "It's not about revenge," I whispered to the empty room. "It's about reminding them I still exist." I opened the folder labeled Confidential, Lindwell Legacy. The cursor blinked against a blank background, the same rhythm as my breath. I sat in the dark, lit only by the faint glow of the laptop screen and the streetlight sneaking through the blinds. The folder labeled Confidential, Lindwell Legacy opened with a click that felt far too loud in the stillness. Inside were subfolders: Legacy, Draft Will, and one that stopped me cold, Confidential, Talus. I opened Draft Will first. It contained scanned pages, legal header, Dad's signature, my name. I leaned in. It stated, plainly and without room for misinterpretation, that I was to inherit 25% of Lindwell Industries. It was dated precisely 1 month before his stroke, the one that took away his speech before it took his life. My heart beat so loud I couldn't hear anything else. My name wasn't added as a courtesy. It was embedded in the legal architecture of the company, by his hand. So why? Why had I been shut out of everything? I scrolled through the signatures again. His lawyer, a notary, witness initials, all proper, all real. The edges of my throat burned, not from tears, but from restraint. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft wrapped in smiles and family dinners. I minimized the window and leaned back, letting the silence settle before memory took over. The old drawer in Dad's office had a key. He'd given it to me the summer before everything unraveled. We were in the garage, where he tinkered with things long past repair. That day, he wasn't fixing anything. He was watching me. "They're good at optics," he'd said, handing me the small brass key. "You? You're good at systems, structure. Use that." I had slipped the key into my necklace chain, thinking it symbolic. I didn't realize until months after his funeral that the symbolism had a physical form, an actual drawer behind his bookshelf. It was empty except for this USB and a half-used legal pad with notes like, "Hold Clyde accountable," and "Draft clean version, Talus knows." The pieces were never scattered. They were simply waiting for me to see them. I clicked into the folder labeled Confidential Talus. Inside, a PDF. Notes from Dad's last meeting with Talus. It wasn't just about ownership. It was about protection. My hand moved to the phone before I realized I'd made the decision. Talus had retired and moved to Asheville after the funeral. Quiet town, golf courses, soft music. I called anyway. It rang 6 times before a familiar voice answered. Slower, raspier, but him. Vesper. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. I found the draft. From my father. It named me. He didn't ask what I was talking about. He never changed it, he said plainly. I still have the hard copy. I closed my eyes. You kept it? For good reason, he replied. There were pressures. After he passed. They didn't want it to be found. They? I asked, though I knew the answer. A long pause. Then, I think you already know. After we hung up, I didn't speak for a while. I just sat there, letting the weight of it all press down without pushing me over. When I returned to the screen, I clicked on a file labeled Legacy Conflict 2020. It was a document, long and clinical, but every paragraph read like a plea. My father had documented patterns of misuse, irregular fund movements, and strange consulting contracts. One name kept appearing, Seraphine, and another I didn't recognize, Elliot Branch, a name listed as external strategic partner, but I had never heard it mentioned once in a boardroom. I read through line items, bonuses issued without votes, travel expenses labeled as legacy PR, and a notation. Why is 80K marked for private wellness? Dad knew. He saw it happening. And instead of confrontation, he laid traps, recorded it, protected what he could. Then I opened one last folder, drafts. Inside was an unsent email addressed to Tallis. And to me. If this gets buried, she'll rewrite everything. Please make sure Vesper knows she was always meant to carry this forward. She understands the company the way I hoped someone would. It wasn't sent. The timestamp was 1 day before his stroke. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I simply reached for the drawer beside me, pulled out a fresh notepad, and wrote the first line. They erased me. He never did. The cafe was too perfect. Brass lighting, sugar cubes in little silver trays, and people pretending their $8 latte bought them serenity. I chose the table near the back, the one with the view of the street, not the people. Seraphine walked in 3 minutes late, punctual enough to seem polite, late enough to assert control. She spotted me and smiled like she'd won something. "Ves," she said, voice like a linen napkin. "You look, well." "I'm not here for compliments." I gestured to the seat across from me. "Sit." She did, smoothing her skirt like a senator's wife at a luncheon. No curiosity, no pretense of small talk, just that signature smile of hers, corporate and calculated. "I found the draft," I said, sliding a copy of Dad's will across the table. "The one he signed before the stroke, the one that names me." She didn't even flinch. She glanced at the pages as if she were being asked to read yesterday's menu. "I'm not here to start a war," I continued, my voice steady. "I'm just making sure you know I'm ready if one begins." Seraphine leaned back, then said softly, "You're not even a real part of this anymore. That was Dad's mistake." There it was. Not screamed, whispered, and sharp enough to cut through any illusion I had left. I nodded slowly, then stood. "Thanks for confirming." She didn't call after me. She didn't need to. That one sentence would replay in my head for days. Back home, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier with a thick envelope. No return address. Inside, photos, financial printouts, names. The private investigator I'd hired weeks ago had delivered. The documents were crisp, damning, and specific. Wire transfers labeled as consulting expenses, all routed to an unfamiliar LLC. Time-stamped photos of Seraphine meeting privately with someone my father once listed as a potential risk. There it was, evidence of a shell game being played under the Lindwell name. Not an accident, not a rounding error, intentional deceit. I poured a glass of water, sat down, and started sorting the pages by transaction date. No panic, just method. My phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring once, then twice before answering. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was tight, breathy. "Vesper, what are you doing?" "Going through some things." "I talked to Seraphine. She says you're digging into things that don't concern you anymore." I said nothing. "You're poking at things better left alone. Don't make your sister feel attacked." I swallowed the laugh that tried to escape. "That's rich." "I'm serious, Ves. You've always been the sensitive one, but you don't understand what it's like to carry the weight of this family." "That's funny," I said quietly. "I thought I'd been carrying it in silence for years." There was a pause. Then she delivered the final blow. "If you go through with this, don't expect me to pick sides." Click. The line went dead. I sat in the silence of my apartment, letting the layers of her words settle. She wasn't choosing neutrality. She was choosing convenience. Later that night, I printed every document, 4 copies each. I bought folders, labeled them. Legal counsel. Board. Backup. Personal. At the bottom of the stack, I placed a photo of Dad and me at the first Lindwell holiday party, before Seraphine took over the invites, before my name started disappearing from the RSVP list. They want my silence to prove I love them, I muttered under my breath. But love doesn't demand silence when it's clean. I zipped up my bag, checked the meeting time for tomorrow, and slipped the folders inside. You erased me from the table, I murmured, voice low and sharp. I'm rewriting the seating chart. The phone rang just after sunrise. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee, already dressed, already tired. The screen read, Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then picked it up on the second try. I knew she'd just keep calling. Vesper, she began without a greeting. Her voice was different, less silk, more steel. You're tearing this family apart. Your father would be ashamed. I didn't blink. I didn't shift in my chair. No, Mom. He'd be ashamed if I sat back and let it happen. Silence. Just breathing. Then she said, You're really going through with it? I've hired legal counsel. It's done. You don't understand what this will do to Seraphine, to all of us. That's when I realized something. I wasn't afraid of guilt anymore. I was past it. I was in the place beyond fear, beyond second-guessing. I understand perfectly, I said. You just don't like that this time. I'm not backing down. I ended the call myself. By 9, I was walking into a law office in uptown Charlotte, the kind with glass walls and quiet hallways. Barbara Watkins greeted me with a firm handshake and the kind of no-nonsense expression I was hungry for. A woman who saw paperwork the way I saw betrayal. Black and white. I laid the documents on her desk. Dad's will, the photos from the investigator, email threads, account statements. I didn't speak much. She read in silence, underlining as she went. When she finally looked up, she said, You have a strong case, and a moral one, but it won't be clean. I'm not looking for clean, I replied. I'm looking for true. She nodded. Then we begin. Today. It was barely past noon when the email hit my phone. Subject, Access Suspension Notice, Lindwell Industries. I tapped to open. Effective immediately, your shareholder access has been revoked pending clarification of your standing in current corporate records. No signature, no human name, just Lindwell HR. They didn't even bother pretending anymore. I closed the email, stood, grabbed my coat, and headed for the office. The air outside was sharp, the kind of chill that makes you feel like you're waking up inside your skin. At the building entrance, the receptionist barely met my eyes. I'm here for my appointment with... I'm sorry, she interrupted, her voice too rehearsed. We've been advised that you're not permitted beyond the lobby at this time. I didn't argue. I didn't demand anything. But then I heard it. Seraphine's voice from down the hall, loud enough to carry, but soft enough to sound staged. She doesn't work here, not anymore. That was the moment I knew she was scared. She was loud now because she didn't know what I had, and I wasn't about to show her. I turned to the receptionist and smiled. Thank you. That'll be all. I walked out as if I'd planned it. Head high, steps even, the kind of walk Dad used to tell me was reserved for winners and liars. The trick, he'd said, was not letting anyone guess which one you were. Back home, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final legal draft Barbara had sent. At the bottom of the page, bold and clear, Defendant, Seraphine Lindwell. I circled her name once. Slowly. Then, I folded the paper and slid it into an envelope. No more second chances, I whispered. Outside, the mailbox waited like a judge with no face. I lifted the flag and dropped the envelope in. This time, the evidence speaks louder than the bloodline. The envelope was waiting on my kitchen counter like it had walked there on its own. No return address. Just my name in that same impersonal font Lindwell's legal team always used. Cold, efficient, and deeply practiced at the art of dehumanizing. I slid it open with the same letter opener Dad gave me when I got my MBA. Inside, a formal notice confirming the temporary suspension of ownership rights, pending further review. Beneath that, a scanned copy of a supposed new will, one that conveniently omitted my name entirely. I didn't react, not the way they wanted me to. Instead, I scanned the document slowly, like a surgeon reading a patient's chart before opening them up. The signature was off. Dad never looped the R in Robert. And the notary stamp? Misaligned. Wrong county seal? Rookie mistakes. Sloppy forgery. I took a photo, filed the physical copy away, and then, finally, smiled. By early afternoon, I was back downtown, stepping into Barbara's office again. Her assistant barely looked up, just waved me toward the glass door. Barbara glanced up from her monitor as I entered. Good timing. I just finished reviewing the Shell Corporation trail from the PI. I handed her the latest packet, Dad's will, the audit trail, Seraphine's memo about internal restructure. She flipped through them quickly, then set the folder down. They're not just dishonest, she said, her tone flat. They're sloppy. I sat across from her. Which makes them dangerous. They think this is just business, Barbara replied. They're not prepared for someone who's here for justice, not profit. We arranged the rest of the plan in 20 quiet minutes. Document sets, witness lists, scheduled disclosures. If Seraphine wanted war, she was getting a paper one, and I had the high ground. That evening, I walked into the Lindwell lobby one last time. I wasn't there to reclaim a seat. I was there to drop off a packet addressed to Seraphine, neatly labeled and sealed with a copy of every damning page I'd compiled. A courtesy, if anything. I left it with her assistant, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Just as I turned to go, Seraphine stepped out from behind the frosted glass wall. Her expression was unreadable, until her mouth curled just enough to show she was enjoying the moment. Is this how you want to be remembered? She asked. Her tone was syrupy, with that edge of disdain she reserved for people she thought were beneath her. I turned to face her. No, but it's how I'll make sure Dad isn't forgotten. She didn't have a reply. I didn't give her time to come up with one. Back at home, the air was still, like the calm before thunder. I poured a small glass of wine, opened my laptop, and clicked into the email draft I'd been building for weeks. One last review before launch. 2. boardolindwell.com. Subject, for your immediate attention. Legal documentation attached. The real will, financial anomalies, surveillance photos, and a timeline so tight it could strangle. I reread every word. Then I clicked Schedule Send. Delivery, 9 a.m. sharp, the morning of the shareholder meeting. I leaned back in my chair, letting out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding all day. My fingers brushed the rim of the wine glass before I said it aloud, to no one in particular. This isn't revenge, it's remembrance, done right. The screen glowed softly, a final confirmation staring back at me. Scheduled. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. 2. boardlindwell.com. The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived like a final note in a long, unresolved symphony. My apartment was quiet, too quiet for what I knew was about to happen. I stood at the kitchen island in a crisp gray jacket, smoothing the collar down with more force than necessary. The blue USB was already tucked inside the inner pocket, secure, silent, and loaded with truth. I checked my phone. A simple notification sat at the top of the screen. Email scheduled. Sent. 9 a.m. to boardlindwell.com today. Silence ends. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind cut through the tension I didn't speak aloud. Pulling into the parking garage beneath Lindwell's main office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt prepared. The lobby buzzed with nervous energy. People looked up as I walked in. Some nodded. Others looked away like they'd just seen someone return from the dead. Security didn't stop me, but their glances lingered. One junior admin near the elevator stage whispered, "That's her! She's the one who leaked it," let them whisper. The elevator ride to the boardroom felt longer than usual, the silence inside more weighted than empty. As I entered, the room stilled, phones in hand, screens lit, eyes darting. Seraphine sat at the head of the table, composed, at least for now. She didn't speak first. It was a board member from finance who broke the silence, tablet in hand. "There's a transaction here. An $85,000 payment labeled as Legacy Consulting. It went to a shell entity tied to Seraphine Lindwell." The air shifted. "This is character assassination," Seraphine snapped, voice sharp and rising. "No," I said evenly, stepping forward. "It's character clarification." She glared at me like I'd unzipped her skin in front of a crowd. Another member chimed in, reading from their own screen. "And these expense reports, they're inconsistent with our audits." Then Clyde, who had remained silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke. His voice was slow, deliberate, each word pulled from somewhere deep and old. "I knew something was wrong when the books got too clean." Seraphine turned to him, wide-eyed. "You knew?" she hissed. "I suspected," he said, "but I didn't think you'd go as far as you did." He looked at the others in the room, then back at me. "She tried to get me to revise ownership documents 2 years ago, offered me a seat on a dummy board. I declined." I let that land. No gloating, no smile, just the truth, delivered clean and clear. Seraphine stood up so quickly, her chair scraped the floor. "This is a setup," she barked. "You all think she's some martyr? She hacked our servers. That's a federal offense." She turned to me like a predator cornered, wounded and dangerous. "We're filing charges, defamation, data theft. You broke the law, and now you're going to pay for it." There it was. Her last card. The threat. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my folder, pulled out my own set of papers, and placed them flat on the table. "Then let's both show our cards, under oath." The boardroom was already full when I stepped inside. The low hum of murmuring voices faded the second the door clicked shut behind me. Some looked up from their printed emails. Others didn't bother pretending they hadn't read them. Screens glowed with PDFs. The truth was no longer tucked away in my pocket. Seraphine stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, her script in hand. Her posture was polished, but there was tension behind her neck, the kind that only builds when control starts to slip. She began to speak, some rehearsed lines about company stability and forward focus, but I raised a hand, slow and steady. "Before anyone gives speeches," I said, "I suggest we listen to a father's voice." The USB slid into the slot with a soft click. The screen behind her lit up. A grainy audio file played, Dad's voice filling the room with a clarity that no written line could have matched. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And that means some people in this room have already started rewriting history. Let me be clear. Vesper was always meant to carry this legacy. Not because she's the loudest, but because she's the only one who ever listened." A pin dropped. Then a pause. Then more. "I've seen ambition, and I've seen dishonesty masquerade as vision. I don't want Lindwell in the hands of someone who knows how to market it. I want it in the hands of someone who knows how to protect it." Silence wrapped around the room like barbed wire. One board member, pale and sweating, dropped his pen. The audio cut. No music, no fade-out. Just Dad's voice, now irrefutable. Before anyone could speak, the door opened. A woman stepped in, mid-40s, sharp suit, clipboard in hand. Her badge read, "North Carolina Probate Review." She spoke clearly. "Per court order, this meeting is to be paused immediately pending formal review of the will's validity and financial integrity of Lindwell Industries." Seraphine's mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes darted from face to face, but no one met them. "You can't just—" she started. The woman held up a printed court document. "This order has already been filed. You've been served. Any attempt to proceed will be considered a violation." For a beat, the room didn't move. Then Seraphine turned to Vera. "You knew!" she hissed. You all knew she'd come back for it. Vera didn't respond right away. Her shoulders sank like a balloon slowly losing air. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. We just didn't think she'd come back this strong. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. Seraphine gathered her things, her heels louder than they needed to be as she walked out. She didn't look back. I stood only after the door shut behind her. No celebration, no applause, just clarity. I turned to the board. The truth has a voice, I said, and it never forgets. As I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. No caller ID, just one new message, a file attachment. Subject, security footage, archives. By the time I got home that night, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a quiet exhaustion that settled into my bones. I kicked off my shoes and dropped my keys on the counter, the clink sounding louder than usual in the silence of my apartment. Then my phone buzzed. No caller ID, just one text message. No words, just a file. Security footage, archives. I stared at it for a long moment before tapping the download button. The file opened to show grainy footage from Lindwell's accounting office, a date stamp in the corner, nearly 7 months ago. Seraphine stood in front of the server cabinet, arms crossed, speaking low to someone seated at a workstation. I recognized him, a junior IT staffer named Kyle, always too eager to impress. Delete the V. Lindwell profile, she said. Kyle hesitated. She's still listed as a beneficiary, though. She won't be for long, Seraphine replied. I'll handle the paperwork. Just do it. The video ended there. I saved it twice, once to my laptop, once to a backup drive. Then I poured a glass of water I didn't drink and stared at the ceiling for 5 straight minutes. The next morning, I drove across town to Vera's house. She didn't expect me, but I rang the bell anyway, holding the drive in my palm like it weighed nothing. She answered in her robe, eyes tired, mascara faintly smudged. Vesper? We need to talk. She didn't argue, just stepped aside and let me in. I plugged the drive into her laptop and played the video in silence. She didn't blink as Seraphine's voice filled the room, didn't flinch when her daughter instructed someone to delete her other daughter from the corporate record. When it ended, Vera sat back in her chair and exhaled hard, like the breath had been trapped for years. I didn't know she went that far, she murmured. You told her to be firm, I said. She interpreted that as criminal. Vera turned her face away toward the kitchen window. I told her to protect the family, not erase it. That was the first time she didn't defend Seraphine, and I didn't press her. Some griefs have to sit for a while before they settle into something real. By afternoon, I got a message from an old college friend who still worked in local media. You're trending. Check Channel 6. I turned on the TV, just in time to see Seraphine walking out of Lindwell headquarters, shielding her face from cameras. Her lips were tight, eyes bloodshot. The voiceover was dry, clinical. Amid mounting pressure from shareholders and a pending court investigation, CEO Seraphine Lindwell has stepped back from her role. The board is scheduled to meet this week to determine the future leadership of the company. I turned off the screen. Later that evening, a plain white envelope slid through my mail slot. No return address, just my name. Inside, a letter on fine linen paper, Clyde's handwriting. Vesper, you did what the rest of us were too comfortable to attempt. You honored your father. See. Simple. But it meant more than anything that had been said in that boardroom. I didn't cry. I folded the letter once and placed it in the back of my notebook. That night, I took a walk past the Lindwell building. I didn't go in, didn't even slow down. I just paused across the street and looked at my reflection in the lobby glass. The woman staring back wasn't erased. She wasn't polite. She wasn't palatable. She was whole. They tried to rewrite me. All they did was show me who I was never meant to become. As I stepped into my apartment, the door buzzed again. Another envelope. Inside, a printout of Dad's last unsent email. In his handwriting, scrawled at the bottom, "Trust yourself. Always." The morning news played in the background as I moved through my kitchen. A newscaster's voice, steady and sanitized, filled the room. Following multiple board resignations and a court-ordered investigation, Lindwell Industries has officially suspended Seraphine Lindwell from her CEO duties, pending further review of financial misconduct allegations. A temporary governance team is being installed. Her photo appeared beside the headline, "Family Scandal Rocks Lindwell Legacy." She looked nothing like herself in that image, flushed, caught mid-blink, the gloss stripped away. I sipped my tea. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was stillness. Not long after, there was a knock at the door. I didn't check the peephole. I already knew. Vera stood there with a manila envelope clutched to her chest, her eyes red and bare of makeup. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, and she walked in like someone entering a confessional. "I didn't stop her," she said before I could speak. "That's my sin." She sat at the dining table, placed the envelope down, and pushed it toward me. "She drained the scholarship fund," she said quietly. "The one in his name. Used it to secure a marketing deal. Claimed it was for brand expansion." I opened the file. Everything was there. Bank records, meeting minutes, her signature. "I asked her about it a month ago. She lied straight to my face." I didn't say anything. Some betrayals don't need commentary. Vera looked at me, her expression brittle. "Do what you have to, just know I won't survive another public disgrace." I nodded. "I'm not doing it for the press. I'm doing it for Dad." She nodded back, then left without another word. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Clyde. "The board met this morning," he said. "We'd like to offer you a temporary advisory seat. It's non-voting for now, but it comes with full access." I didn't respond right away. "This isn't charity, Vesper," he added. "You earned it." I thanked him. Hung up. But I didn't say yes. The next day, I visited Dad's grave. It was quiet except for a slight breeze and the sound of birds I couldn't see. I placed a single blue orchid by his name and knelt. "I kept your name clean," I whispered. "I'm just not sure I kept mine." I stayed for a while, letting the silence sit with me. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. To myself. "Dear Vesper, you didn't burn the house down. You only refused to live in it while it rotted." I folded it once and slipped it behind the cover of my notebook, next to Clyde's letter, and Dad's final words. Just as I was turning off the light, another email arrived. Subject, final probate hearing, scheduled message. "Your presence is requested." The courtroom smelled like dust and restraint, paper files, aging benches, 1,000 unsaid things absorbed by old wood. It was the final probate hearing. No media, no cameras, just paperwork, a judge, and whatever remnants were left of the family I used to belong to. Seraphine sat at the opposite table, eyes down, flanked by a junior attorney in a cheap navy suit. Her makeup was flawless, but her posture was cracked. She didn't look at me once. My own legal team sat quietly beside me, shuffling documents and whispering confirmations. But I barely heard them. I didn't need the prep anymore. I knew what mattered had already been spoken, months ago, by Dad's voice on a USB drive. The judge looked over her reading glasses. "We've reviewed the filings, supporting exhibits, and prior declarations. The court recognizes Vesper Lindwell as a legal beneficiary and 25% stakeholder in Lindwell Industries, as designated in the original, will dated June 3rd. The words landed with a softness that belied their weight. No gavel, no applause, just law being law. Truth made tangible. I stood only when the judge dismissed the room. Seraphine stayed seated. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but she didn't respond. Outside, the sky was overcast, and the courthouse steps felt like walking out of a place I'd never have to return to. Tallis was waiting near the sidewalk, holding a cup of coffee and an umbrella tucked under his arm. "You won more than you think," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You stayed human," he added. We walked in silence for half a block. He didn't need to say more, and I didn't need to answer, not then. Back at home that evening, I found a cream envelope slipped through the mail slot. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Seraphine's. I paused for a moment, then opened it. The note was brief. You were right. I just didn't want it to be you. No apology, no signature. Just a final sentence from someone who had finally run out of strategies. I read it twice, then folded it and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because I forgave her, but because some endings don't need responding to. The next morning, I unlocked the office space I'd rented during the case. Tiny, windowless, filled with whiteboards and notes I hadn't erased yet. I packed it all into a single box. No fanfare. Victory doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it's knowing when to leave with your name intact. Later, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The consulting profile draft blinked on the screen. I filled it in line by line. Name, credentials, experience. But under mission statement, I paused. Then I typed, "Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you refuse to let define you." Just as I hit save, my inbox pinged. Subject: Advisory Opportunity, Financial Reform Initiative from ClydeAllindwell.com. The email from Clyde sat open on my screen for a full hour before I picked up the phone. It was everything I once thought I wanted. Permanent board seat, veto authority over ethical restructuring, the kind of offer that would have validated a younger version of me, still hungry to belong. But I wasn't that woman anymore. When the board secretary picked up, I didn't ask for a callback or details. I simply said, "Declined." Then hung up. No speeches, no dramatic exits. Just the sound of my decision cutting clean through the noise. An hour later, a reporter from a national business magazine called. I almost ignored it. But then I answered. "We're doing a feature on the Lindwell transition," he said. "You're a central figure now. Is there anything you'd like quoted on record?" I paused, then offered one sentence. Bloodlines built the company, but silence almost buried it. I ended the call before he could ask a follow-up. Later that afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. The envelope was cream, the handwriting small and tight. Vera's. Inside was a printed copy of Dad's final email, the one I thought had been lost. But now, across the bottom in blue ink, was his handwriting. Trust yourself. Always. Vera had written her own message in the margin. I found this behind the old clock. I never looked before. I should have. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't need to. Some truths find their way to the surface when you stop protecting the people who buried them. The letter also mentioned Seraphine, checked into a private facility out of state. No more titles, no more staged boardroom power plays. Just silence, this time earned. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into the foundation portal and reactivated the Lindwell Scholarship Fund. The account had been dormant for over a year, quietly emptied, misused under Seraphine's tenure. Now, funded by part of my settlement, it came back to life with a single click. I updated the mission statement, for those who've been written off but refuse to disappear. The next day, I stood in front of a group of high school seniors in a drafty gymnasium in Charlotte. I was the guest speaker for a financial literacy workshop. Nothing fancy, no media, just folding chairs and kids who hadn't yet learned how cruel or inspiring the real world could be. The principal introduced me with a warm smile. Our next speaker is a consultant, a survivor, and a builder. That was the first time anyone had introduced me without using my father's name. I stepped up, cleared my throat, and looked out at faces that still believed in possibility. "I didn't come here today to tell you how to make money," I began. "I came to tell you how to keep your name." When the workshop ended, I stayed behind to answer questions. A girl with a blue backpack asked what I used to do before this. I smiled. I fought for the right to exist in my own family's story. She nodded slowly, like she didn't quite understand, but might one day. As I walked out into the Carolina sunlight, My phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Advisory Opportunity. Financial Reform Initiative. From Clyde. I didn't open it right away. I stood outside the school, warm light on my shoulders. The weight of what used to be finally peeled off like old skin. This isn't the end of my legacy. It's just the first one I got to define.